2013. Paula, are there any apologies?
I have apologies from Councillor Mayo, Councillor Yin, Councillor Hislop. There's also a correction to the papers and that Councillor Ferguson and Councillor Dick are no longer on the membership of this committee.
Are there any declaration? Sorry. Apology. Okay, thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor McComb.
Thank you, Chair. In reference to item 6, the applicant and the supporter are both known to me, but I do not consider the relationship to be sufficiently close to debar me from discussion.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. And item 7, one of the objector is known to me, but I don't believe that it would influence me in any way.
Any other declarations of interest? No. Could you read out the procedures, please, Clerk? Sorry, Councillor.
Could you just ask a question? If Councillor Dick and Councillor Ferguson are no longer on the committee, are there any new members of the committee?
Yeah. Somebody answer it.
Yes, I was informed yesterday that we've got Councillor Stephen Thompson and Councillor Alistair Witt will be coming on the Planning Applications Committee, and they will be at the next meeting once they've received the normal training.
That's a bit strange that 2 are coming off, but you've already got Graham Tate, who's come on because he's present today, and then you've got another 2 coming on. Why is that? Can't you take 2 off and bring 3 in?
We already, Councillor Tuckfield is no longer on the committee.
Ah, right, that's fine.
Councillor Tate is a direct replacement for Councillor Tuckfield.
Thank you. Where's that up?
There is a logic behind most things we do.
It'll be handy for the rest of the council and for the public to know these things.
Paula, could you read out the procedures?
The Planning Applications Committee will consider each application in turn as detailed on the agenda. The case officer or an area planning manager or other appointed officer will make a short statement addressing the determining issues accompanied by digital images. Any late information, amendments or corrections will be reported at this time. Members may ask questions of officers following the presentation on points of clarification. For those applications which are in accordance with council policy subject to public speaking, the order of eligible parties being heard will be as follows: third parties objecting to an application, third parties supporting an application, statutory consultees objecting to an application, elected members of Dumfries and Galloway Council who are not members of the Planning Applications Committee. Such members should withdraw from the committee chamber after making their presentation, applicants or their agents. The Chairman will individually invite those who have registered in advance to speak in respect of the application to come forward, sit in the reserved seat and make their presentation, after which they may be questioned by committee members. No questions may be asked of members. When each presentation is completed, people should immediately return to their seats. After all the representations have been heard, the meeting is then in formal session and no members of the public may address the committee from the public gallery. The Planning Applications Committee will then proceed to determine the application, or if the application is a major development significantly contrary to the development plan or a national development, agree a recommendation to be made to full council, who will then determine the application. The decision notice will be issued after a period of 48 hours has passed. The Chairman has been provided with a list of eligible representatives who have registered in the period specified in council policy. These individuals have all had their registration to speak confirmed and no other person will be allowed to speak. Representatives have been placed in alphabetical order. A copy of the public speaking list is available from the committee officer taking notes of our proceedings. Representations on planning applications must be made on the basis of valid planning matters only. Certain matters are not normally material planning considerations and will not be taken into account by the Council when deciding on a planning application. Representatives are encouraged to use the time allotted to clarify any points they consider material and address the determining issues. Representatives should not raise any new matters without explaining why they were not raised earlier with the case officer. Please do not repeat what is in the report, as members will have already read the report. Presentations will be strictly limited to 3 minutes per person, excepting for national and major developments, which by their nature are more complex and where the time limit will be 5 minutes. This should allow sufficient time for interested parties to make relevant points. The chairman of the committee will ask you to come to a conclusion if you take too long.
Thank you, Paula. Councillor Geddes.
Remiss of me, sir, when you're accepting declarations of interest, I should have pointed out that I'm a board member of Swestrans, and Swestrans is mentioned at various occasions on item 5 of today's agenda. I do not consider that the mentioning of the organisation prejudices me in any way, but I would like it noted nonetheless as a board member.
Okay. Any other Swestrans board members wish to? I'm a substitute, if you want to put that down, but well, following Councillor Geddes' line, I don't think it precludes me from the proceedings. Councillor McComb.
I'm also a substitute chair.
Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda is a minute of the meeting of the 27th of March 2013. Is that a true record of the proceedings? Thank you. Okay, item 4 is the Newton Farm Gatelawbridge, Thornhill Planning Application, use of a former quarry for outdoor paintballing centre, widening of existing access and formation of car parking area at Newton Farm, Gatelawbridge, Thornhill. Right, we had a site visit there on Monday of this week, and it might be helpful, Mr Robinson, if you ran us through the slides so that for those members who couldn't make it.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, just a quick recap of the application site, which is for a paintball centre at this site. It's just to the south of Newton Farm in Gatelawbridge, which is to the east of Thornhill. This was the application site, which includes a former quarry area, landscaping with trees, and the access to the site, which is from the unclassified 480N road. The proposed, this is an existing informal access to the site, and this is what's proposed for a parking area, which was just a proposed access. There was 14 car parking spaces proposed for the actual paintballing centre and 4 spaces for a group of local walkers. This is a slide of the local road network that's leading to the site. Effectively, you can access the site from the south, taking the road from just south of Closeburn and following the local road network up to the application site, or you can access it from Thornhill. And here's a couple of photographs from the site visit, just to recap the members that were there on Monday. This is the application site from the main road. This is where we'll access an area where 14 car parking spaces are proposed. This was the area where 4 car parking spaces were to be proposed, and this is a close-up of actually the area where 14 of the car parking spaces were proposed, and the actual paintballing site will be on the top of the hill there in the area of trees. This is looking down from a proposed access track which would lead up to the paintballing site. And this, we didn't look at this on the site visit, but this is actually a photograph of the area at present, which would be for the paintballing activities. And here's a couple of photographs of the road itself. This is the unclassified 480N road, which is where the access to the site will be from. This is the visibility from looking from one side of the site and then to the south. And this is just some photographs showing the approach to the site, just to show the nature of the local road network. It's just a photograph to demonstrate the width of the road and some of the informal passing places that currently exist. And that's just a quick recap of the application, Chair.
Thank you. Paula?
So a procedural note, according to my records, Councillors Blake, Councillor Dempster and Councillor Tate, we're already in session. You're not able to take part in this item.
Okay, we're in session, gentlemen. Councillor McCocktree.
Thanks, Chairman. I would move the recommendations as outlined on page 29. I don't think there's any need for any discussion on this one.
Councillor Ogilvie, no, Dryborough. Didn't mean to offend you, actually.
That's all right. I've got here.
Just
Says Jock McKee, lucky me. Anyway, I think it was useful to actually go on the site, and I think I have to concur with Councillor McCotry and the roads officer's assertion of what he actually said within the report. If you can imagine a paintballing system up there, it'd be young young people or people who would have to drive to that particular area. We used both roads, if you remember, Chair, going through Thornhill and then back out to the opposite route, and the roads are just not wide enough, and I agree with everything the roads officer said there. I'm happy to second Councillor McCotry on that.
Councillor Thompson.
The points have already been addressed.
Councillor Maitland.
It seems to be some sort of consensus building up. I'm not quite so clear. I'd like to actually discuss this a little bit more. What I'd like to ask the officers is that, have we got any methodology of asking whether we can have this on a temporary basis? Because the actual infrastructure that's going to be involved with respect to paintballing, having been paintballing with my teenage children, actually you don't need a colossal amount of infrastructure to go paintballing, is my experience. I think that we should look carefully at our policies which are talking about development of business and tourism. The proposal is actually very modest, and those of us who were up there can remind me, did we see one car when we were up there? We were in a bus, and I don't actually remember seeing a single car, not one, when we were up there. Now, that's actually out with the times. As you noticed, the times are very limited. So I'd like to know whether it's possible to limit this to a temporary permission. What will be the impact on that? I'd like to ask members whether that's, officers whether that's possible, to suck it and see. Because I don't think that we've got, in the current regime, I don't think we should be simply closing things down. Somebody pointed out to me, and they're absolutely right, in the countryside, in an area like that, that's where you get shooting parties. You could quite regularly get shooting parties with a convoy of 8 or 10 vehicles. We'd have absolutely no control over that whatsoever. None whatsoever. And that's the sort of activity that happens, along with farming activities. So I think before we just say no, 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 let's actually explore the options, please.
Mr. Robinson.
Okay, Chair. Yes, we could explore the opportunity with putting a temporary condition on to monitor the way that the use operates with the methodology. So that could be explored, Councillor, yes.
Councillor McKee.
Thanks, Chair. Well, on the site visit, it was mentioned about the size of trees to hide behind, and I think Councillor Maitland was one of the few councillors that could hide behind the tree. But my point relates more to car parking. I think we've seen the proposed site for 14 cars, and we're lucky if we got 2 or 3 in it, as it was at that time. And I think it would be almost a case of constant moving of rockfall in that site, and it probably be quite dangerous even out with that times. So on that basis that there's inadequate car parking on site, I'd be happy to go with the rest of the members.
Councillor Maitland. Sorry. Councillor Gilroy.
Well, with respect, I don't think that's our problem, because I think that's the applicant's problem. If he's wanting 14 car parking spaces and that's what we agree, that's what he's got to do. Whether we think he can do it or not is neither here nor there, because he has put an application in to say that he will. So presumably that is not a reason for refusing this application. I'm kind of with Councillor Maitland on this one, because, you know, yes, the roads are not great, but this is a business that would promote tourism, it's a new business, we should be supporting all of that. And the only reason that we're saying that that can't happen is because our roads are not fit to assist with this business proposition. And that's not a very good reason either. I thought there were quite a lot of natural passing places, particularly on the way down, if you're going through Campbell. Is it Campbell Wood? I can't remember the name of the village. There's quite a lot of natural ones. And do you know, I don't see why we would not if we can, I think actually if we can do a temporary. I don't know. You said we can. I don't quite understand how that can be done with this application here. Is it a recommendation that we could add, or how would that work? That would be all I'd like to know.
Thank you, Chair. Basically, you are advised not to attach temporary conditions in cases where you're going to have permanent structures added, just because of the obvious cost to the applicant. In this particular instance, this was looked at originally as to whether temporary permission could be attached. If a permission were to be granted, I would strongly suggest that you should do it on a temporary basis, say for a 3-year period, because there aren't an awful lot of structures which they're proposing. I think we would need details of exactly what and where they're going to be. We've got some indication of those, but this one all really hinges on the road infrastructure that already exists in that area. To make it acceptable, you've got clear advice from roads officers. It would need some 20 passing places to be put in, often involving land which is out with the control of the applicant. So that was the concern. There would be another number of issues which I think we would reasonably want to address. I mean, you'd have the temporary permission if you were minded to grant it. I would suggest a period of 3 years to see if that was going to go ahead. I do have concerns about the parking. It is a material planning consideration because, I don't know if Andrew can show the slide again, because they would need to get the 14 spaces in there, they would need to do a considerable amount of stabilisation and excavation works. And it's quite close to the next one. That's it. To get 14 spaces in there, it's going to require an awful lot of excavation, and I think you probably have to have things such as gabion baskets or something to prevent it falling down there. So implicitly, there would be some works done even for a temporary permission to facilitate that. Tree felling, for example, we wouldn't want to see the trees just being felled on the site. They should really be retained unless there are particularly good reasons for them to come down. Hours of operation would be another thing that I think we would need to address if any permission were to be granted. And probably something like a green travel plan would be useful as well, to see if there was a method. If this is going to prove difficult, then could you run minibuses, for example, from Thornhill, which would reduce the volume of traffic? These are all things which I think would need to be teased out. The fundamental issue with this one, as I say, was really the current road infrastructure was not deemed to be suitable to take the volume of traffic which is likely to be generated by this. But it's a judgment call where you could reasonably view it either way.
Councillor Maitland.
Okay, so as far as sort of cleanly dealing with issues, probably we probably are best to refuse this as it stands. I mean, I can see that. However, I think there is a clear signal, certainly from some of us, that we are not averse to this sort of idea happening, and if ways can be accommodated with a second application, that's up to the applicant. I wanted to tease this out because I think it's quite important that we don't just say no because the roads are too small, therefore you can't do things. I think that's wrong. But I'm glad we've actually had this discussion, and I thank the members for their thoughts and support. Thank you.
Councillor McKee.
Hi, thanks, Chair. It's just that I've got concerns on page 20, the fourth bullet point down. MDA would be looking to employ a local workforce of 2 people who would live on the site. Where are they going to stay? There's no mention of accommodation of any sort. And what about the toilet facilities and that sort of thing, if it was given permission, even if it was only temporary?
Yes, clearly there is no application for a house on the site. There is no existing house on the site. And unless this was an operation which was proven to be financially viable and successful, and they could prove that there was an essential need for a house at that location, under current policies, that wouldn't be supported. But it's not proposed either at the moment.
Councillor Garroch.
Well, I certainly would not move against the recommendation in this particular instance, Chairman, but I do take on board entirely, the points that Councillors Maitland and Gilroy have indicated, and indeed agree with them. Go back to the old cliche, we've got to get the message out that Dumfries and Galloway is open for business. Okay, in relation to appropriate applications, but if we decide today that, and certainly in my case with a degree of regret, that the application will be refused as recommended, is there any way that we can, I'm not suggesting you can incorporate it into the decision, that would be inappropriate, but is there any way that we can get the the view of hopefully all of the committee across to the applicants saying, look, you know, in principle, at least we understand what you're endeavouring to achieve. And perhaps if you were to come back with a more detailed application, etc., that, it would be reconsidered, obviously.
Obviously, you don't want to predetermine a possible future application, but the comments which are made here are obviously now available online, and the applicant would be able to hear the clear steer from members on this as a way forward.
Okay, we have a recommendation to refuse. Anyone otherwise minded? Okay, thank you. Do you wish to announce it?
The committee has agreed to refuse the application on the grounds set out in the report.
Okay, item number 5 on the agenda is the erection of circa 350-bed hospital, staff residences, energy centre, formation of new accesses, access road and internal road network, formation of helipad and car park, 980 spaces including disabled parking, landscaping and ancillary development at land at Garroch Farm, Garroch Loaning, Cargenbridge, Dumfries. Mr. Hannah.
Thanks, Chair. As the Chair mentioned earlier, there was a site visit to look at this application site on Monday just past, with a number of members and interested parties attending. A number of the following slides were provided as a handout, and so they will be familiar to some of the members. The application site is located approximately 4 kilometres southwest of Dumfries, immediately next to the Garroch Business Park and immediately adjacent to the settlement boundary for Dumfries. This slide shows the topography of the site and indicates that the site is largely defined by the hill within the northern section of the site. And this is an indicative site plan for the proposal. I'll just point out a number of the key features on this. The red light doesn't seem to be working at all. Okay. So to the northwest of the site, we have the Garroch roundabout, which is a new roundabout, or an enlarged roundabout that's being proposed, with the Glen Road being realigned along here. There are 3 accesses to the site, the main access being formed from the Garroch roundabout, a secondary access to serve the A&E part of the hospital, and a third access via the Garroch Business Park, which will act as a service entrance, which will be managed to access the service yard. The building itself is in several blocks or sections. We've got the main treatment and diagnostics block in the centre here, with the main entrance down here. We've got 3 ward blocks, combined assessment unit, and a separate building that is the women and children's unit. Down in the south of the site, there's some staff residences that are proposed, an energy centre, and a suds retention pond. And in total, there are 980 car parking spaces across the site, with bus stops shown near the main entrance in this location here. The southwest of the site, in approximately this area here, the southeast of the site, is identified as a consultation zone for the Health and Safety Executive relating to the facility at DuPont. And the Health and Safety Executive have recommended that the sensitive hospital use be located out with that consultation zone, but with staff residences, energy centre and car parking acceptable within the consultation zone. the Health and Safety Executive have no objection to the proposal. These are indicative site sections that show the hospital down below the hill and show the relationship of the proposed hospital with the existing Garroch buildings. Indicative site sections show that the building would be cut into the hillside, so some of the top of the hillside would be removed to form bunding around the eastern boundary of the site and to allow the building to be stepped down into the site, predominantly 3 stories in height. A reference design has been submitted and is being worked on, which sets out the NHS's requirements in terms of clinical adjacencies. The NHS have indicated that in order to operate this hospital, they need to be sure that the layout of it is functional and appropriate to their needs. And so this reference design, whilst this is an application for planning permission in principle, is not envisaged to change significantly in any detailed application. Ground floor plan, first floor plan, second floor plan. And there's a number of aerial views coming up which are useful in showing how the various components of the hospital building fit together. And a number of artists' impressions and sketches or photo montages are shown here from Toroctory House, from Kilnford Farm Shop, from the Garroch roundabout. This is a view of the proposed main entrance to the site. A view of the entrance to A&E. The inpatient ward blocks, and the central courtyard with the spiritual centre. And this is an internal image of the proposed main entrance. A ZTV map has been submitted which shows the zone of theoretical visibility of the hospital building at the proposed heights. And this shows in pink that the hospital will be, the visibility of the hospital will be largely confined to the immediate locality and to the western fringes of Dumfries. It should be borne in mind that this is based on topography only, and there would be intervening trees and buildings which would reduce visibility further. Moving on to a few photographs. This is the view that you would get from the A75 just adjacent to the Kilnford Barns on the approach into Dumfries. And central on the screen, on the horizon, you can see the Cargenbridge Tower. This is a view stepping over onto the Glen Road with Kilnford House on the left-hand side looking towards the site. The height of the site is indicated by the small tree that can be seen dead centre of the photograph there. It's worth keeping an eye on that one because that tree will crop up in the next few photographs as well, just as an indicator of how high the site is from a distance. This is from the A75 at Garroch view, looking towards the Garroch roundabout and towards the application site with West Hill in the background. Moving closer to the Garroch roundabout with the site beyond. On Garroch Loaning, with the site to the left, and you can see the tree that I earlier referred to on the left-hand side of the screen, indicating approximately the higher part of the site, with the access to Garroch Farmhouse shown on the left-hand side. 3 new accesses are proposed to the site, and the main access will be taken directly from the Garroch roundabout on the left-hand side here. The Glen Road, which you can see ahead, is to be realigned. And this is shown in this drawing here. The Garroch roundabout itself is to be enlarged slightly. The diameter of the roundabout is to be increased. And you can see the realignment of the Glen Road to the southwest of that drawing there, and the closing up of the existing Glen Road. This is a view of the site of the proposed access to A&E. Again, you can see the tree in the distance, which shows the higher part of the site. This is the third service access from Garroch Business Park, and this is to be a managed access, details of which are required to be submitted as part of the detailed application or by condition. And this will serve service vehicles only, except in cases of emergency. Moving on to the site itself, it's fairly difficult to take any meaningful photographs on the site due to the size of the site, but we've got a number here. This is standing on the adjacent to the Garroch roundabout, with the proposed access coming in on the right-hand side of the photograph, heading up to the higher part of the site where you can see the tree, and the Garroch farmhouse is shown on the left-hand side. This is standing on the higher central part of the site, looking back towards the access, the tree and Garroch farmhouse on the right. Panning around, looking towards Garroch farmhouse on the left-hand side, with the industrial buildings behind and beyond, with the service access going in through adjacent to the industrial buildings, and looking towards, in general terms, the energy centre and the residences. This is panning round again, looking towards Toroctree House. And this is a road infrastructure improvements map that show a number of off-site improvements that are being proposed as part of the development. The application site is down in the left-hand side, and a number of improvements are proposed on the trunk road on the Dumfries bypass. The Garroch roundabout we've just had a look at. Improvements are proposed to the Glasgow Road roundabout, the Edinburgh Road roundabout, and the Lockerbie Road roundabout. And then within the local road network, road improvements are suggested for the Pleasance Avenue New Abbey Road junction and the Dalbeattie Road Park Road junction. And in addition, cycle route improvements are proposed in the area of Pleasance Avenue New Abbey Road and the Dalbeattie Road Park Road junction to link the existing cycle network to Broomlands and Trequer and beyond to Georgetown. In addition to the transport measures that are shown here, a bus service will be provided to the proposed site that will be equal to or better than the existing bus service to Bankend Road. Just having a look at a few of these junction improvements. This is the Glasgow Road junction improvement. You can see that there's a widening of the flares on 3 of the accesses on the Glasgow Road here. Less significant on the Edinburgh Road, and less significant again as you move onto the Lockerbie Road. This is a photograph of Pleasance Avenue New Abbey Road junction. And this is a suggested junction improvement for that location. The details of any junction improvement in this location would be required to be agreed by legal condition, as would the implementation of any such junction improvement. And a photograph of the second junction, which is the Dalbeattie Road Park Road junction. And again, the suggested junction improvement is a realignment there to ensure that Park Road is the main road, with Dalbeattie Road being a secondary road with a suitably realigned access onto Park Road. Again, this would be subject to legal agreement in terms of the detail of any junction improvement and the implementation. And this shows the suggested cycleway improvement, and again, the same conditions apply in terms of the legal agreement. In summary, no objections have been received by the key agencies, and the key objections raised by the Community Council and by third parties relate largely to transport and residential amenity. However, a number of transport initiatives are proposed such that the proposal would not adversely affect the existing road network. A public bus service would be provided to be equal to or better than the existing bus service to Bank End Road. And whilst the site's isolated from residential areas, improved cycling links would partially offset this. The reference design that's been submitted as part of the application for planning permission in principle demonstrates that the application site could accommodate the proposed development without significant adverse effects on local amenity and the wider landscape. The detailed application would drill down further into looking at what the precise issues were and how those could be addressed. The environmental statement that's been submitted with the application indicates that the natural and built environment will be adequately protected, and in overall terms, the proposal offers a number of significant regeneration opportunities. It would offer improved access to health provision for the regional community, it would support development of the local economy, and it would promote wider regeneration for Dumfries. So in conclusion, the proposal is considered to comply with the Council's development plan policies and objectives and is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Hannah. Any members, any questions for the officer at this stage? Councillor McKee.
There's a couple of things on roads, Chair. You want us to do it now or leave it till later on?
Are the questions on the report?
Aye, was any consideration given to the Dalbeattie Garroch Loaning junction, Dalbeattie Road Garroch Loaning junction? And have you considered putting in the road, where he come off the A75 at the Garroch Loaning Castle Douglas Road end, before he come to the Glen turn-off, have you considered putting an additional lane in there for the amount of traffic maybe coming to the hospital and the amount of traffic wanting to turn right to reduce the chances of obstruction?
Okay, thanks, Chair. I'll just go back to the relevant image on that one. And just to clarify, what you're asking is whether whether it's been considered that there should be 5 spurs coming off that roundabout, one
no,
to serve.
You're at the wrong roundabout with all due respect. It's the other end of the Garroch Loaning on Dalbeattie Road. The amount of traffic you consider coming off the Park Road onto Dalbeattie Road is such that you're making a Dalbeattie Road a secondary. But you come down to the bottom of the hill to Cargenbridge. There's a small roundabout there. Have you looked at altering the diameter of the roundabout there or making alterations there? Let's put it that way.
Okay. A detailed transport assessment has been carried out for the application that looked at all of the routes coming to the hospital from the town centre and from beyond, and that transport assessment assessed the roads and the junctions and concluded that all of the junctions were of sufficient existing capacity to accommodate the increase in traffic.
Councillor Dryburgh.
Thanks, Chair. It's on process more than anything else. I mean, this is a planning permission in principle, and it's a major application, so therefore there would have been a 12-week consultation period on it. When we get to the full application, if this is to be agreed, the full application would come forward for the more appropriate things. Does that then need to still go through a 12-week consultation period as well?
Okay, thanks, Chair. No, it's a simple answer to that. The subsequent application would be approval of matters specified in condition rather than a new planning application, and so they don't need to go through the same process unless it's decided by the applicant that they wish to submit a revised full application for whatever reason.
Councillor McCocktree.
Thanks, Chairman. I attended a presentation at Cargenbridge, the local community council. But most of the stuff we've seen up there was considered there. Now, the big complaint from the Community Council was obviously roads issues to do with the Glen. But with something flashed up there on the Park Road, Dalbeattie Road reprioritisation, That was not in the stuff that the community council saw. And indeed, when they were looking at the traffic congestion side of things, they did feel that maybe making Park Road one way, whatever direction after a wee bit of study, might be a better idea. Can you maybe put that thing back up again? Because what effectively you're doing, instead of making the Dalbeattie Road the main, in fact, you maybe better with the photograph. So Dalbeattie Road would be stopped off, probably just at that junction there, and then would sweep in, and then it would have a stop, and that would then mean that the major road would actually be Park Road, going on to Dalbeattie Road coming down the hill. I mean, what I've got to say is that 30 odd years ago, when the Janefield area was part of my ward, I used to get complaints from folk in that area about rat running. That's when the ICI was a major site, employed almost 2,000 people. Now, the shift patterns at the ICI were roughly the same as shift patterns at hospitals. What I don't want to see is that turning back into a rat run again, and bearing in mind you've got that bit of open space there before you hit the built-up areas of housing. The traffic already exceeds the speed limit going along that road. So I would certainly hope that any changes to that particular junction should go back out for consultation, because I certainly know that would cause quite a bit of concern, not only to the folk in Cargenbridge who are coming and going to the town, but certainly the folk who stay in Janefield, because they've never been aware there could be that major change where there could be quite a massive increase in traffic. I mean, my own preference would be to try and stop Park Road being a rat run. It's maybe a case of educating folk who are travelling to the infirmary to use the bypass in all cases rather than cutting through the town. I'll leave that one just now, but I certainly want an assurance that this should go back out to consultation with the public, because that was never ever part of the plans that were laid by the health board as far as I'm aware.
Councillor Coe.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a wee bit surprised at the positioning of the A&E entrance. It appears to be almost directly opposite the entrance to Kilnford Farm Shop and Tea Room. To me, that seems rather surprising.
Thanks, Chair. The design and layout of the site is something that's been proposed by the applicant, and however, I am aware that the site layout has gone through considerable evolution process to get where it is, and that relates to the need to have particular wards relating to particular treatment and diagnostic blocks and so on. The desire to get appropriate views into the hospital to create the right healing environment for the hospital, the need to dedicate the lowest parts of the site to suds and retention basin and so on, and also the HSE consultation zone to the south of the site that excludes the hospital development being further south than it is. And that has resulted in the helipad being located where it is, with the access to accident and emergency located there. What benefit there is to be had from having the A&E access taken from the Glen Road is that the Glen Road would normally be clear of traffic and parking, and it would allow a clear blue light access to A&E without ambulances having to try and negotiate getting through the car park to the A&E department. So that's my understanding of how the site has evolved in design terms, but ultimately it's for the applicant to say how they've designed the site.
Councillor Dempster.
Thanks, Chair. It's on the roads again, and in particular page 62, 4.15, where it talks about the Glasgow Road roundabout and the Edinburgh Road roundabout, minor adjustments to flare on 2 approaches in Edinburgh Road and adjustments to flare on 3 approaches in Glasgow Road. If anybody's tried to come out of these roads at certain times of the day, it's an absolute nightmare. And we've got a blue light situation where we're going to be causing a problem that we need to try and resolve now, because we have an opportunity now that we'll not get again. We should be making major adjustments to these roundabouts, looking to the future, although there might not be responsibility on the health board to look to the future in terms of road accessibility and traffic movement. But I think we need to do more than just minor flares, because we will have blue light situations, and what we don't want to get is a Crichton situation where it's absolutely impossible to get to the hospital at certain times of the day within a reasonable space of time. So I think we need to put more emphasis on what we do at these roundabouts in terms of accessibility on and off them, because what we're getting at one particular time of day we might extend to more times a day, and we don't want to create problems for patients and emergency services getting to the hospital. That won't do at all, and that doesn't take account of the buses that need to get there as well.
I remind members that we're in questions for the officer in his report at the moment. We haven't gone into debate yet. Have you
My
a question,
apologies.
Councillor?
Can I ask the officer why he's not extending the road wider?
You can certainly ask him that. Mr. Hanna.
Thanks, Chair. The proposed improvements to the trunk road are directly as a result of the modelling work that has been carried out as part of the transport assessment that considers how transport across the whole town will change as a result of this development moving out to the Garroch. And that transport assessment has concluded that there would be an increase in traffic of around 10% along at particular times along the A75 Dumfries bypass. And without wanting to get too involved in the technicalities, that it is that figure and those modelling results that have resulted directly in the road improvements being shown. The hospital have submitted road improvements that are to Transport Scotland's satisfaction and reflect the anticipated increase in traffic. It would be unreasonable of the council to require that the hospital undertake road improvements over and above that is required directly as a result of the development.
Councillor Dempster, have you another question?
Yes, and it's very brief. On page 40-41, where page 40 talks about response to transport assessment, fourth bullet point, page 41 says none of the above takes into account strategic growth, but does take into account committed development. Is that what you're referring to in your previous response?
Sorry, Councillor, could you repeat what...
If you look at page 40, it talks about response to transport assessment. I suppose that's our response. And the fourth bullet point down, the narrative says none of the above takes into account strategic growth, but does take into account committed developments. So I don't know why we're not taking into account strategic growth. That's what I was point I was trying to make earlier.
My understanding is that relates to the fact that the modelling work that was carried out takes into account permissions that have been approved for developments in the area, but doesn't take into account what may happen in the long term. So yes, you're correct. Yes.
I'll come back when we get into the debate, but that's the point I was trying to make. Yeah, thanks for that, Pat.
Councillor Maitland.
Thank you. Can I ask again, it's on page 41, looking at page 41 and page 64. It's about the transport assessment. It's talking about public transport and says a fundamental requirement must be bus penetration to the front door of the hospital. And I am absolutely in agreement with that. But what I want to ask, if I could, is how does that square with page 64, paragraph 4.28, which talks about the transport assessment, notes that the bus service should enter the site to be within an acceptable walking distance of 400 metres. And I'm not completely clear how those two stack up, because I think that's quite an important issue.
Okay, thanks. The two responses there are provided by, firstly, by the TA. The transport assessment requires that the bus service should be within 400 metres. The council's strategy and transportation officer has suggested that it should be to the front door, effectively, and that's agreed with. It should be as close as possible to the main entrance, and the site plan does indicate two bus stops just here, which is reasonably close to the main entrance. Whether they could be made to be any closer could be established as part of the detailed application, but certainly the indication is that, and the desire and intention is to try and get them as close as possible to the main entrance.
Mr. Maitland.
May I just follow up? I mean, I think, having seen what happens with respect to other new hospitals, the detail of saying, oh, of course we must have a bus quite close, but it's the actual detail of making certain that transport, both for people who are disabled and for people who can use public transport, I think is absolutely critical. So I really need to know what we can do if we were so minded later on to deal with that particular issue. So it's a technical question now. Just maybe it's not for right now, Chairman, but when afterwards, maybe we could come back to that, please.
This is a planning application in principle, and so we are just looking at the principle at the moment, and it will be open as part of the detailed application to require that the bus stops be provided as close as possible to the main entrance. Alternatively, that could be worked into the conditions on the outline, on the planning permission in principle as well.
Councillor Combe.
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask for an explanation, Patrick, of the paragraph at the top of page 42, where it refers to the commuted sum?
Sorry, could I ask what paragraph that is? I don't have a copy of the papers that has page numbers on it.
Oh. Page 42 of 122 pages.
I don't have a copy of the papers that have the numbers on. If you could refer to the paragraph number, thank you.
Okay. It's in relation to transport policy. And I'll read it out to you, Patrick. In these cases, the improvements will be required by Transport Scotland, but it is understood they may accept a commuted sum instead at the three junctions on the A75. Sorry, at the three junctions on the A75 with the A76, A701 and A709. This is on the basis that the disruption due to the construction outweighs the small improvement gained in reality compared with the modelled improvements.
That's correct. There have been discussions between the NHS and Transport Scotland in respect of a commuted sum, and Transport Scotland have indicated that they would be amenable to a commuted sum instead of those works being carried out, on the basis that that money be spent on general improvements on the Dumfries bypass. So instead of requiring improvements to those specific junctions, they'd be looking at wider benefits to the Dumfries bypass. There was never any satisfactory conclusion to those discussions between the applicant and Transport Scotland. And as a result, we have conditions that have been attached suggesting that, or requiring those works to be carried out unless there is a subsequent agreement between Transport Scotland and NHS on appropriate commuted sums and how that would be spent.
Chair, I'm still puzzled. Are Transport Scotland saying that there may not be improvements at these junctions?
Transport Scotland are saying that the modelling work indicates that the capacity of the junctions is marginally less than it should be, and as a result there should be this increase in flare on a number of the junctions. Transport Scotland have also said that they recognise that because that may only result in a white line being moved by perhaps a metre or thereabouts, that the disruption involved to doing that to a roundabout on the trunk road may be so great that it outweighs the benefit in widening the road by 1 metre. But what we have at the moment is a report and a recommendation that says those junction improvements should be carried out unless final agreement is reached on the commuted sum.
Thank you. That's much clearer.
Councillor Geddes.
Thanks, Chairman. It's going back to parking again at paragraph 4.26 in the report, page 64, talking about the totality of car parking spaces, 960, well, 980 actually, and saying in fact that it represents a slight over-provision. Now, elsewhere in the report, Chairman, Police Scotland are saying that the one thing that they would not wish to see under any circumstances is a repetition of the current situation in relation to the existing DGRI, where cars are parking, to a significant extent on the road. And my question would be, sir, that as part of this process, can we seek the assurance that the relevant traffic management orders will be put in place, as it were, to curb that practice right from the very start? I think it's absolutely imperative that we do that, i.e. in the basis of the old cliché, Chairman, start as we mean to go on. So can I have that assurance? So that would be progress.
Mr. Hanna.
Thanks, Chair. Certainly the proposed parking provision of 980 spaces is an over-provision. As it says in the report, the minimum spaces recommended is 619. But the transport assessment has done a detailed assessment of what they consider the actual impacts would be at that particular site and recommended 960. One of the conditions that's recommended is for a travel plan to be submitted, and that travel plan will set out a parking management regime for the site that will address all of these issues in detail. It will address how parking is arranged on site, and for example, one of the things that it will be looking at is potentially zoning of parking for staff and visitors, so that staff are required to park as far away from the hospital as possible, allowing visitors to be as close to the entrances as possible, and therefore a faster turnover in car parking spaces. And so the travel plan is looking to introduce regimes to manage car parking within the proposed site, yes.
That's reassuring, Chairman, but I take it that traffic management plan would not only look at the issues on site, but would look at issues in relation to certainly the adjoining roads. That's the thrust of my question.
Absolutely. Yes.
Any other questions for the officer at this stage? No? Okay. We have a couple of speakers on this subject. Mr. Fallis, on behalf of Mr. O'Hagan. Mr. Fallis, could you come forward and take a seat, please? You have 5 minutes, Mr Phillips.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee, officials of the council. I'm speaking today on behalf of Mr John and Mr Mark O'Hagan. Mr John O'Hagan lives in Garroch Farmhouse, and both parties are managing director and directors of Value Plus Furnishings, which is adjacent to the farmhouse and part of the business park arrangements. Whilst it is accepted that this is an in-principle application, sufficient details have been provided for us to ascertain that there's going to be a significant scale of impact upon my client, both my client's premises. Principal objection in the areas of concern relates to the impact that is going to ensue in the premises as a consequence of the works at the Garroch roundabout, and other concerns relate to matters of landscaping, bunding, etc. in close proximity to the premises. To take the first issue relating to the Garroch roundabout, both Garroch Farmhouse and the business have a sole point of access of the Garroch Loaning right adjacent to the actual spur onto the roundabout, and that access is identified as being requiring to be changed and altered as a part of the facilitation works on the roundabout. Now, there has been no communication with applicants or their agents regarding how the impact of that is going to be appropriately managed to facilitate my client's access to his domestic premises and also to his business arrangement. Now, the business itself presently has 16 members of staff. It's associated with manufacture and distribution of furniture. So the comings and goings on a daily basis through that access are quite significant in number, which don't appear to have been recorded in any of the traffic assessment information provided, nor the fact that there is a large number of delivery vehicles to and from the premises. So the access is not just a domestic, indeed it's more significant than the farm arrangements as well. And to that extent, the implications on that business are potentially going to be devastating if they're losing business for weeks on end whilst these works are being done. As I say, there's been no discussions as to how that could be done, and this is of great concern to them, how any remedial measures would in actual fact be implemented. The other major concern extending beyond that is in relation to the other works along the Glen Road and other business premises in the area, because in talking to some of the other parties along that, again, there's been no communication as to how these things are going to be remediated. And I would think that the significant changes that there is at the Glen Road, why that couldn't be retained and minimise impact on parties and businesses along there, is not, clearly presented or any information provided why that couldn't be accommodated in any scheme. Discussions have led me to believe that this is the solution that's being proposed, and few, if any, alternatives have actually been submitted for consideration. The other concern we've got relate to the landscaping, bunding, etc., that's going to be placed along the communal boundary between my client's premises and the proposed application site. Councillors that were on site on Monday appreciate just how high that area is in the centre compared to the rest of it. Now, whilst this is, there's a bit of a dichotomy going on here. They're saying, lots of this information is still to be resolved, but fair today as well that the basis of what you're seeing just now is actually being worked up to the formal scheme. There's going to be significant engineering works on the site to excavate a great deal. There's talk about lowering, cutting the site into the landscape, mitigating the landscape impact from the building. 3 stories, yes, there are some sections that are indeed 4 stories high as well. No real explanation as to relative levels of where these ground floor levels are going to be. But
30 seconds, Mr. Fallis.
Thank you. Suffice to say, all the material on site is to be retained on site. It's said in the document. So in that case, a lot of the bunding around the perimeter is going to be significant, and it's the height and scale of that bunding that we've seen in illustrative indications that are of great concern to my client in the farmhouse, because it's going to rob them of a lot of natural light and daylight In the report, it's dismissed, and they say, oh, it's not significant. But when you've got high areas of bunding, planting on top of that, I'm sorry, but the impact on my client's property is indeed significant.
Could you wind up, please?
Yes, certainly. And there's no indication to date, due to the lack of communication from any of the parties at the Health Board, etc., that their concerns will be taken into account in any subsequent scheme that's devolved onto the site. Thanks for hearing my representation this morning.
Thank you, Mr Fallis. Any questions for Mr Fallis? Councillor Dryborough.
Thank you, Mr Fallis. I mean, obviously there was neighbour notification given, I would imagine, for this planning in principle. Can you give us any idea of what sort of thing that your client has done to get communication with the NHS or the developer in that particular thing? And I've got also a second question I'd like to ask you.
Neighbour notification was eventually done. It was wrong in the first instance. It was incorrectly addressed. But the neighbour notification isn't done by the applicants these days, you have to remember. That's now a responsibility of the council. But that matter was sorted out, and Pat duly sent us out the requisite notices. And on the basis of that, we've been able to formulate our opinions here. And it's fair to say, and the applicant and their agents will come up and say that all due consultation processes regarding the application were undertaken pre-application, as is required for major applications. But the concern that my clients have is that there was a few sort of notices put in the classified section of the paper. Now, it's quite clear their business, are going to be directly affected by this. And there's concern that for want of a letter or a chap on the door, they couldn't have actually came into some kind of dialogue for it. And the same goes for the parties up the Glen, at Kilford Barnes. Instead of just going for the regulations say all we need to do is that, it's just that extra wee yard that could have been gone to try to get things on board. Attempts have been made to try to resolve some of these issues, but early lines of communication, initially when the Health Board were wanting onto the site to do a lot of the preparatory digs, groundworks, tests, etc., etc., there's no direct access onto this site from the public roadway. They can only gain access up my client's driveway. Now, there is a restriction on any access off it. The owners of the site, the Mears I think it is, they have a servitude right of access across that land for the movement and transfer of animals, for beasts, and associated with agricultural activity. So what the NHS were wanting to do with regards to all the groundworks, geology, assessments, etc., not covered by that. But my client says, yeah, fine, we're quite open to it. Go on board and facilitate that access arrangement to it. And it's when, thinking through the scheme, they thought, well, hold on, there's implications here. What's going to happen when all those access works are doing? How are we going to get backwards and forwards? And they were trying to open up an opportunity to maybe resolve the access issues by potentially coming off what's going to be the service access at the south of their premises, off the industrial park. And they started sort of, is there a chance for that? And they were just, dismissed on the basis, it's got nothing to do with us. It's agents are dealing with that, and couldn't get a hold of them. And things just got to the stage where there was no progress at all. It was as simple as that. And it's that frustration and the concern that, well, if they don't get their concerns in at this stage in principle and get them as a mark on the record, then when it comes to the subsequent aspects of it, I'll just be dismissed or kind of, or you should have done it at that stage and it's not there, or you could have entered into dialogue with it.
When you go up.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Again, I mean, what I've heard there is that there's attempts by the client to try and get in touch with the NHS, and there's potential for, and it's theoretical, detrimental to effect to the business that they actually run.
Certainly.
I mean, theoretically, there's also a potential improvement for the business as well, with the increase in traffic and things like that, the potential for having more advertisement of that particular business as well. What would you say to that?
The nature of the business has got no direct link or relationship with the NHS itself. It's to do with furnishings, lightings, accessories and things like that. So there's unlikely to be any immediate direct association with, the health board or anything like that. The real concern is just maybe for weeks or potentially longer periods of time, they're going to have real problems servicing orders, servicing clients' demands. And in the current climate, when things are very, very tight, if they prove to be, if the situation is that they're unreliable or things can't be done, then, customers or client may look elsewhere. And, I don't think there are any immediate things that they can piggyback on with this happening with the health service that they can directly have. They don't have there are a warehousing and distribution side of things. They don't have a showroom. So it's not like folk coming into the hospital can then have a wee wander around the showroom and maybe pick up a bit of, some accessories, some lightings or things like that. So, that correlation isn't necessarily there.
Councillor Geddes.
Well, I'll take your guidance in the process aspect of it, sir. It's a question, probably not for Mr Fallis, but arising from Mr Fallis's, presentation and Councillor Driver's questions. Do you wish me to, or would you give me leave to put it now, perhaps maybe from the appropriate council officer, or do you wish to wait until the debate stage?
I'd rather wait to the debate stage, Councillor.
That's okay, as I say, as long as it's not lost sight of, sir. Thank you.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. Mr Fallis, you've referred to, the effects of landscaping and bunding, which might have an effect on your client. I think what the point you were making was that while some of the site is going to be cut away, the spoil is to be retained on the site. Can you give me some indication of how you would see that affecting your client?
Well, the concern is that if you look at that diagram presently there, and again, it's maybe these matters can be sorted out when the detailed matters come forward, but presently, all the information that we have and the details that we've seen is that where you've got all the trees around the southeastern up the eastern boundary up to the top of the roundabout, that's going to be all on top of a large mound. It would appear to be grassed in the first instance, a lot of planting on the top of it. And there is no indication yet as to what relative levels are going to be for that. The illustrative drawings that we've seen looking up the proposed new access off the Garroch roundabout has that mound and trees being quite significant and high, 4, 5, 6 metres higher than the existing property. And you've got the trees on top of that. Now, it's maybe a case, relatively speaking, adjacent to the property, that height may not be quite as significant. But there's no clarification of that. And if this thing is getting stepped down, and from where the councillors were standing on the top of that hill on Monday, which is near as damn it, right in the centre of where the blocks are just now, it was quite easily and ready to observe that there was quite a difference that you're going down there. So if there is some kind of cascading tier down the way, then within the site itself, it's still going to be probably higher than the existing ground features for the farmland, because all that big mound is going to have to get distributed somehow. So the relative levels are going to change. And if they're significantly higher than, the property itself, because of where it is in relation to the property, it's the afternoon sun that's being lost, and it's generally regarded it's the afternoon sun that's the one that's most critical for people's enjoyment of their premises. If you've got the sun setting due south, right over the top of the Tashkent, the ICI plant, as it moves through in the rest of the day, with the mounding, with the landscaping aspect of it, with the trees on top of that, then very soon, and for a large part of the year, the garden area is going to be covered in shadow. And, this is the sort of scale of the impact that we're concerned about.
Councillor Thompson.
Just on that, then, you're actually not aware of what the sort of scale of the massing around your client's property would be just now, and your main concern relates to that lack of detail, is that correct?
There is concern about the lack of the detail, and my client has made initial inquiries to try to ascertain that aspect of it, and maybe a consequence of that, asking for alterations to the access, etc. Things seem to be shut down on the basis it'll come along at the detail stage in that.
Councillor McCaughey.
So, can I just add, really what you're saying is that at the moment your client enjoys a clear view across that roundabout the fields beyond at the moment from his property. You can see
And to the west across the open farmland where now the hospital is going to be.
So essentially, if his right to have that view was maintained, that would address most of your concerns.
I'm sure if something like that could be attained to try to maintain some quality of amenity for the dwelling house, then it will certainly overcome some of the objections that I've got to it, certainly.
Okay. Any further questions for Mr. Fallis from members? No? Thank you, Mr. Fallis. You can take your seat. Thank you. I have two speakers from the NHS, Mr. O'Keefe and Julie White. You have 5 minutes, folks, between you, not each.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you about our application for the erection of a new District General Hospital for Dumfries and Galloway. The development of this new hospital is a key, significant strategic priority for the NHS in Dumfries and Galloway. We need to ensure that we have a hospital within Dumfries and Galloway, an acute hospital that can provide clinically effective and sustainable services for the population of Dumfries and Galloway for the next 30 to 60 years. We also need to make sure we've got a hospital that can respond to changes in demand for healthcare that will arise from our change in demographics and from the change in healthcare needs locally. We've undertaken a huge amount of work over the past year in relation to the preparation of the reference design and in relation to the site selection process. In terms of site selection, we've undertaken an extensive public involvement exercise with workshops held across the region, from the east of the region across to Stranraer in the west. We've undertaken a two-stage site selection process where we had a short list of 5 sites, which was then reduced to 2 and then from 2 to 1. And throughout that process, we had involvement of the public, patient representatives, clinicians and partner organisations. We looked at a whole range of qualitative and quantitative criteria, including accessibility, deliverability, the public's preference, environmental impact and the ambience of the site. We've tried to work in partnership with the local community, with patients, with clinicians and indeed with the neighbouring owners of the areas adjacent to the site. I will hand over to Dennis now, who will cover the detail in terms of our application.
Chair, I'm the project director for the scheme. I've been involved in delivering NHS hospital schemes of this size and type for the last nearly 20 years. This scheme is a planning application in principle. Construction is not envisaged to actually commence until probably the second quarter of 2015. So we have a considerable period of time before construction phase will commence. In that period, we'll be procuring companies to complete the final design. And the matters that have been raised today in relation to transport congestion and access to neighbouring properties will be developed and considered in considerable detail. The scale and nature of this project means that it will attract major national and international companies with the design capability and resources to deliver a project of this type, and that they will be challenged with these planning conditions and will be looking to make sure that these planning conditions are met in full. In relation to design quality, the hospital and the board is very keen to make sure that we get the maximum benefit of the site, therapeutic benefit of the site that will be imparted to patients. There's a great deal of work that's been done in terms of evidence-based design, and it's important that we make maximum use of this rural setting to make sure that we get the maximum benefit to our patients. In terms of the concerns that have been raised, if I could move the slides forward, please. What you have in front of you is a cross-section across the site from the Garroch Farm property, leading directly across in the upper slide to the main entrance of the hospital. This is done to scale and is representative of the massing of the hospital on the right-hand side of the upper diagram. And on the lower portion of the diagram, you can see an extract of this section. And this, I think, gives a very clear indication at this early stage, and I stress that there is considerable more design work to be done by the successful company that will undertake this scheme, that the mounding that we're suggesting at the periphery of the site is in no means inconsistent or incongruent with the relationship of the Garroch Farm site. We are respectful of the Garroch Farm site, and we are very keen to make sure that we engage in further dialogue with all neighbouring properties to make sure that these matters, such as the ones that have been addressed...
30 seconds, Mr O'Keefe.
So, in conclusion, I'd like to say that we've had a number of meetings with the objector, and we are also keen to make sure that we continue further dialogue. We were not able to conclude discussions with him simply because we needed to acquire additional land to get into that service road access. But now that those discussions have been concluded, we'll be keen to enter into further dialogue and make sure that we come up with something which works for all parties concerned.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for Mr O'Keefe? Ms White? Councillor Gilroy.
Yes, thank you. We were shown on the map of the layout of the hospital where the access for accident and emergency was. Could you tell me where outpatients will be?
Yes, outpatients will be, show this pen, yeah, outpatients will be in this part of the hospital, in the main part of the hospital here. Just in relation to that issue with
access through the main entrance.
Yeah. And in terms of the A&E concerns, we are mindful that the proximity of the Kilnford farm shop, and we have looked at the possibility of moving that junction further down the Glen Road to mitigate that issue. But that again is something which, you know, coming back to the point that we're not commencing construction until 2015, there'll be considerable amount of dialogue with the successful company that will complete the design and make sure that those issues are addressed.
Let's come back on the outpatients point of view, because I'm looking at the car parking for outpatients. Then it's not very user friendly, and you know, if you go back to where we are at the moment with DGRI, you go up there and it's very difficult to get parking very near. Quite a lot of outpatients are not there for a hike for their health. They're not very well, or they're needing visiting various departments. And I just wonder if you've got that right in this design.
We will be, as part of the development of the car parking arrangements, as has been indicated, we will make sure that elements of the car parking are suitably zoned, principally for disabled car parking, and then for priority will be given to visitors and patients that will be closest to the main entrance of the site. And indeed, this is coupled with the accessibility statement that we produced and has already been submitted as part of the planning application in principle. So we're very mindful of the need to make sure that we've got adjacency of car parking for patients and visitors.
Can I ask you how many car parking spaces are up at the present hospital in total?
Yeah, at the moment, it's about the same amount that we're going to propose in the new hospital site. But I would stress that when we leave the existing hospital site, certain services will be retained on the existing hospital site. The Creswell building will be retained, and there will be activities continued for those services. So the demand, the actual switch of services to the new site is actually less than the demand that's actually required at the existing hospital. So there is a contingency built in there.
And a number of the services that will be retained will be outpatient, a range of sort of physio and occupational therapy outpatient services at Creswell, so patients would continue to go there for their outpatients.
Councillor McComb.
Thank you, Chair. Mr O'Keefe.
Yes.
Do you anticipate more of the National Health Service staff using their own private cars to this site compared to the existing hospital?
My response to that would be on the contrary. One of the elements of the travel plan that we're required as a planning condition to provide will be to encourage staff to use public transport. And returning to the issue that was raised about the bus route into the hospital, we will make sure that this principal bus route coming into the hospital will allow drop-off points right outside the front main entrance of the hospital. And this will encourage staff to use public transport.
I assume, Mr. O'Keefe, you will be negotiating with the bus providers to ensure that their services fit in with the shift patterns of the hospital.
Very much so.
Councillor Dryborough.
Thanks very much, Chair. I'm glad I'm Councillor Driver rather than Mr. Driver and things like that. You know. Mr. O'Keefe.
Tell me something else, but I'm not bothered.
Mr. O'Keefe, just coming back to what Mr. Fallis said earlier on, I think what I heard you saying was that you will look to continue the consultation with the clients of Mr. Fallis, and you have been in considerable consultation before, contrary to what Mr. Fallis actually said. And I'm actually pleased to actually hear that. Coming back to something that was mentioned earlier on with regard to transport management of the car parking and things like that, it's something that just came to mind, and the use of helicopter landing pads for things like road traffic collisions. And I'm just wondering if you're taking into consideration that we've potentially got 2 helicopters that could be used for a road traffic collision, for instance. And part of that road traffic management, or car park traffic management system, would be to have a secondary helipad within the car park system. I'm just wondering if you've considered that as part of your ongoing discussions.
Well, this is a planning application in principle. We're at an early stage of the process. Currently, we've been in consultation with our partners in relation to helicopter access, and we're currently envisaging 1 helipad as indicated at this stage, but the dialogue is ongoing.
Councillor Blake.
Thank you, Chairman. It's just to expand on something that Mr. Driver said. Mr. Fallis highlighted the concerns of his client about the access into Garroch Farm during the construction stage, especially the works round about the roundabout. I understand that you said that there's now been a land acquisition in the Garroch Loaning industrial estate area that may rectify that situation. Could you just confirm that, please?
Well, I would comment that we would be keen to continue our dialogue with all residents affected by this development, including, of course, Mr. O'Hagan. And if we can come to a satisfactory conclusion to alleviate his concerns, we're more than willing to do that.
Come back on that. Yeah, but can you confirm that is now a possibility, that the land is now available?
Yes, it's definitely a possibility. One of the reasons why we were unable to stipulate exactly what may or may not happen is because we didn't have the land that we were referring to. So naturally, we don't want to give expectations or promises that we can't keep.
Okay. Councillor McCaughty.
Thanks, Chairman. You made a point there about you reckon that there'll be fewer people travelling by car to that site. Have you done a definitive bit of research on that? Or is that an assumption?
Well, part of the planning conditions is to...
Mr. O'Keefe, could you move that microphone away or point it towards you or get nearer it or something?
Sorry, yeah. As is indicated in the report, we will be, and the planning condition stipulates, we'll be undertaking a travel plan. Part of that travel plan will be assessing the analysis of the car parking requirement, and we'll be minded to make sure that we show reductions in the use of private transport to the hospital and a concurrent increase in public transport. And that will be monitored, and that will be part of ongoing progress as the hospital is in operation.
Councillor McCaughty.
I mean, I'm well aware at the moment there's quite a number of staff actually walk or cycle to Curtin Hospital. I know there's hospital consultant stays down the road from me in Rochel. He walks up there back most days of the week. And there's certainly some staff who live in Georgetown do the same. that site in terms of a cyclist or pedestrian is not as accessible, to be quite honest. And the other worry I've got is when I looked at the submission you put in with your planning application as to where the members of staff stayed. I mean, there's a 50-page travel kind of plan in there, but there's a high proportion of people stayed in the Georgetown area. That means, I mean, what I'd like to see you doing is try to encourage them to access a new hospital by the bypass and not cutting through the town and clogging up Pleasance Avenue, Park Road, Dalbeattie Road area. So I would hope you're going to be doing some work with your existing staff. I think there's a lot of work needs to be done with Swestrans in terms of transport as well. Have you had any great discussions with Swestrans to date?
Yes, we certainly have, and we very much want to continue with those discussions.
Councillor Maitland.
I want to ask Mr. O'Keefe, much has been made about this site and that in fact it's on a hill, and the hospital arguably might be sort of slightly further up the hill than the car park. I've certainly seen hospitals, a new hospital which has been built with a car park on a slope, Chairman, and users, patients and carers, as members have said, want to park as close or have access as close, if not in the blinking hospital, to where they can get. And, there's no point in bucking that trend. So I'd just like to ask Mr. O'Keefe whether he's thought about facilities for almost what I would suggest is park and ride. Because, if we don't think about this now and consider the options of that, the chances are in the future that you can't build it in. And I am concerned that we don't create a system where we haven't thought about that. Can I ask you, will that all take that into account?
Yes, we're very mindful of the fact that we have an ageing demographic. And we're very mindful of the fact that increasingly it's anticipated that of that proportion of the population, there'll be increased incidence of dementia and other concerns. So the design will be focused completely on ensuring that we address the statutory requirements of the Equality and Diversity Act, which supersedes the Disabled Discrimination Act, and making sure that we have full compliance with all of the relevant legislation in terms of access into the hospital in a user-friendly way. The board has recently held a very useful event with Equality and Diversity members in conjunction with the local authority, and we want to continue with that dialogue. So as a key stakeholder in our development, addressing the needs and concerns of disabled persons or other persons that would have mobility issues is paramount.
Any other questions for Mr. O'Keefe? Or Mrs. White? No? Okay. Thank you very much, folks. You can take your seat. We're in session. Councillor Geddes first.
Thanks very much, sir. It was, you'll recollect I alluded earlier to raising a question. It goes back to Mr. Fallis's submissions. I'm sure that the committee would agree that, it's imperative that this work is carried out in such a fashion that it does not impact adversely on his clients' legitimate business activities. And the thrust of my question, Chairman, would be, are we confident, if this application is granted, as I personally hope it will be, that clause 18 of the proposed conditions would deal, which essentially relates, sir, about construction environmental and management plan and construction method statement. Are we confident that that condition, as postulated, could in fact deal adequately with the concerns which Mr. Fallis has raised on behalf of his clients?
Hannah?
Thanks, Chair. As the Councillor stated, there are two conditions relating to construction works. The Condition 17 relating to a traffic management plan and Condition 18 relating to the wider construction issues on the site. It's implicit within any construction environmental management plan that that consideration be given to adjacent land unit users whilst construction is underway, with respect to dust and noise and so on, to ensure that adjacent land unit users are as little affected as is possible during the construction process. In terms of condition 17, the traffic management plan will look specifically at how construction vehicles move to the site, what arrangements will be put in place for access to adjacent landowners during the construction works and so on. So yes, I'm confident that those conditions are adequate for the purposes.
Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor McCaughey.
First thing I want to raise is just following from what Alistair said. Under recommendation 6, Pat, could that be adapted to take on board the points raised by Alistair and also Mr Fallis in relating to the immunity of his client vis-à-vis the bunding in front of the Garroch farmhouse? Could recommendation 6 be amended to ensure that Mr Fallis's client keeps the immunity he presently enjoys? It'd be a case of removing that bunding or the bulk of that bunding and putting it somewhere else. There's other areas in the site that are obviously there for disposal of some of the earth. But I think under 6, if we can protect the immunity currently enjoyed by Mr Fallis's client, I think that would be the way to go.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Yes, the Council is quite correct in that condition 6 relates to landscaping scheme that need to be provided as part of any detailed application, and that specifically requires details of the alignment, scale and form of the bunding works, and that those should reflect local landscape character and landforms. There's two issues really that need to be considered when those details are submitted. First is the benefit of having some form of bunding there in screening the hospital development from the Garroch farmhouse, so that the Garroch farmhouse isn't looking out over a view of the hospital itself. And secondly, quite rightly, the bunding needs to be such that it doesn't adversely affect Garroch farmhouse. So there's a middle ground that needs to be reached in terms of protecting the amenity of Garroch farmhouse. And quite what that middle ground is, as yet, we don't know, because this is why we need to see the details and understand exactly what the proposal is in order to understand exactly what the implications are on the adjacent land user.
Councillor Dempster.
Thanks, Chair. There seems to be a general acceptance of the principle of construction. I think that's a good idea, and I think I too welcome it. And we seem to be more interested in the detail of how we manage patients to and from hospital. And I think that's healthy as well. Which brings me to the point that I was touching on earlier on. When I was a wee boy, which is a long time ago, if you saw 6 cars an hour, you got excited. Now, if there's a 6-minute window when you don't see a car, you think there's something wrong further up the road. So there's a huge shift in transport and how people use transport, public and personal, in my lifetime. And the applicant says this building will be serving the public for the next 30 to 60 years. So we need to be kind of visionary, especially when Councillor McCaughey is suggesting, quite rightly, that we try to encourage traffic away from urban roads onto the bypass. We need to be sure that we make additional provision that makes that a general traffic-free or restriction-free system for access to and from hospital. And I think that's what I'd want to ensure, that we spent some time dealing with the access routes to and from the hospital. But the principle of the thing itself is absolutely fine, and I would personally look forward to seeing a new hospital serving our region.
Any other members, anything they wish to say? Councillor McCaughey.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I don't think anyone's against the development in principle, but I do know, as one of the local members, that the main issues that are affecting the folk in the area are transportation issues. Now, I did mention the junction with Park Road and Dalbeattie Road earlier on, but that's not contained within the recommendations as far as I can see. Is that correct, Pat?
Certainly, the details of that need to be agreed as part of the legal agreement. Yes.
Because I really believe that would cause a bit of public concern both in the Janefield area and the Cargenbridge area. they're not contained within the recommendations, so I'm quite happy about that. But what I would like to see, though, is a bit of, if the Health Board and Swestrans are going to be talking, I'd like to see some involvement with the 4 local members here as well. As one of the few folk who actually uses the bus service, and the current service to the infirmary is every 20 minutes. It used to be every 15 minutes until the college was planted up there. And that is my main concern. I sat in the planning committee area stage where basically the college was waved through. Their traffic plan was written in the back of a fag packet, more or less. And that's why we've ended up with the horrendous traffic problems we've got up at the Crichton site. And I don't want to see that being repeated. So I would like to see local members being involved in discussions between Swestrans and the Health Board. I mean, the other issue that strikes me is, at the moment, people come into town by bus. The bus that goes up to Crichton does a circular route through the town. It can pick up folk to the White Sands, pick them up to the town centre, pick them up from the Lower Burn Centre, transport them up to the infirmary, and the same coming down again. Uniquely in this case, every bus coming from the west, where it comes from Stranraer, Cargenbridge, Castle Douglas, Dalbeattie, actually turns into the Garroch Loaning and goes along Dalbeattie Road to access the White Sands. So what I'm thinking about when you do this travel plan, is it possible that buses every so often that are coming in to the town actually go into the hospital site and deposit people, so folk know if they catch a certain bus from Stranraer, that bus will actually access the hospital site before it goes into town. Because it seems very pointless dragging folk into the town centre to dump them. They've then got to wait for a bus to transport them back out again. They've then got to catch a bus to transport them back into the town. They catch a bus and they go back past the infirmary again. So it's issues like that I think we need to look in some detail. Not only for the people who are furthest travelled, but even folk within the locality. There's situations at the moment where folk in Trequeer would have to go into the town and come back out again, whereas they're actually on the route to the hospital. So I would ask that when we come to look at the travel arrangements, that the 4 local members get involved with Swestrans and the Health Board, because I think we've got something to contribute to this.
Councillor Dryburgh and then Councillor Maitland.
Thanks very much. And I think we're getting too much into the detail here. This is a planning in principle at the end of the day. I think everybody agrees in principle it's a good idea to have a new hospital. Whatever happens, we'll come forward with the full applications, and I'm sure the consultations will actually happen. I do agree with Tom, however, that board members should be involved in that consultation, certainly to the degree which he says. But I think with this planning in principle, I've got absolutely no problem in going with the recommendations, and I hope that will see the end of this particular discussion, because the full application is going to be the one where we get into the details as opposed to the bus routes and all that sort of thing.
Councillor Maitland.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, I'm tempted to get into the detail again, but if people haven't got the message that within this planning application that members are overexcited about parking, travel, transport, all these particular issues, that's what's getting them going, then they haven't been listening. And I would hope sincerely that all these thoughts are taken on board. I will just say that I wouldn't entirely trust the local ward members. This is going to be serviced. This is going to be serviced, going to service the whole of the west and east of the region. And I have to say that I think it's quite important that all members are concerned with transport issues, not merely the local members.
Councillor Geddes next.
You must be getting your bus pass very shortly, are you?
Councillor Geddes.
That, I would suggest, Chairman, is an issue for another day. I would merely, say that I'm delighted to support Councillor Dryburgh's motion, if that's indeed a motion. That's not meant to curtail discussion in any way, shape or form. This is a good news story. Let's embrace it. Let's get on and provide a facility at the end of the day, which is, it really is, it meets the needs of the people of Dumfries and Galloway.
I suspect that Councillor Dempster is going to make a plea for the people in the north of the region, but maybe not.
I've just got to remind Councillor Maitland that there is a geography that includes north, and that doesn't seem to have happened. But no, I was going to say, I think if we ever get to a stage of discussion with Swestrans, obviously, we have only a 2-hourly service. It's important that serves the hospital as well, and it's a council matter, and I would suggest that Swestrans speak to councillors, not just particular ward members.
Yeah. I'd like to ask Mr. Hannah, it's on back of what Councillor Dempster said earlier on. How far forward do they project traffic figures when they're doing a traffic assessment?
I think I would have to refer to the transport colleague on that particular point.
Well, we might as well hear from him. He's sat there all morning, so do to hear a story from him. Hate him to get bored.
2018.
So that's just 5 years from now. Right. Okay.
Okay, so I think this applies for 3 years, doesn't it, this planning permission?
Councillor McKee.
It's just a thought on what Councillor McCaughey said about the present bus coming from Stranraer and the route it takes into Dumfries. Given the proposal for the amendment of the Park Road, Dalbeattie Road, that could create issues. I'm sure they'll take that into consideration when they're looking at that. But certainly councillors for North West Dumfries, I'm sure, would welcome being involved in any discussions on transport issues as well. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion or recommendation. Follow the recommendations. Anyone otherwise minded? No? Follow?
The committee has determined to approve the planning permission in principle subject to the conditions as set out in the report.
Members, it's 12:18, according to my clock, or 16 or something. I think we should maybe just break at this point for lunch and reconvene at 1 o'clock. Okay? Thank you. Welcome back. We'll move on to item 6 on the agenda. Erection of wind turbine, 18 metres hub height, 27 metres to blade tip, and associated control cabinet at High Milton Farm, Elrig, Port William. Mr. Murray, I believe this is one of yours.
Yes, thank you, Chair. As you say, this is an application for planning permission for a single 27-metre high two-blade wind turbine at High Milton, Elrig. This is a view towards the site from the C26 on the northern approach to Elrig. The proximate turbine location is indicated by the black arrow. The white building is the farmhouse and range of steading buildings. In that view, the base of the turbine would be just over the horizon, but blades would be visible from that aspect. That's a closer view on the same road again on the northern approach to Elrig Village on the C26. In that view, the turbine would be to the left of the farmhouse and farm buildings. I actually put that one in to try and highlight the fact that there were some power lines visible on the horizon there, but I'm afraid they don't show up in the presentation. This is a view towards the site from the opposite approach to Elrig. This would be from the south, from the coastal approach. That's a broad view. The turbine in that location would be more or less central in the slide towards the distant horizon. That is a view from the minor road, the U98, going over the hill to Mochram, sorry. Approximate turbine location indicated again adjacent to the farmsteading and farmhouse. This is another view from the same location. Again, this was taken to try and highlight the fact that, as mentioned in the report, there are 3 existing Proven type turbines at Low Milton Farm, but unfortunately, as is often the case, they don't show up very well in the slide when it's displayed. The 3 turbines would be in the left of that view, and again, the proposed turbine would be more or less central, adjacent to the white farmhouse that you can see there. This is the site plan showing the location of the turbine in relation to the farm buildings. This is the proposed turbine itself, 18 metre to hub, 18 metre diameter rotor, given an overall height of 27 metres, and in this case, it's a 2-bladed design. That's a photograph of the proposed turbine itself. This is a comparison that was given as compared to
The previous turbine that members will note from the planning history, there was a previous application for a 54-metre turbine at a different location on the same farm, and that was just a comparison that was made between the previously proposed 54-metre 3-blade turbine on the right and the now proposed 27-metre 2-blade turbine on the left. I think to highlight the significant reduction in potential visual impact. That's an indication of other wind turbine proposals within a 3-kilometre radius of the site. The following images are supplied by the agent, and I assume you want them shown later or now? Okay. In that case, to sum up, advice is that the proposal generally accords with policy and guidance, and the recommendation is to approve subject to conditions.
Thank you. Any questions for the officer? Councillor McKee.
Could you go back to the map, please, showing how many turbines are in the area?
Just to clarify, the red dots are refused or withdrawn applications. The green are approved and or implemented ones, and there are amber stars, which are applications which are pending.
Any other members, any questions for the officer? Okay, we have a speaker here, Mr. Bill Robinson, the applicant, please. Mr. Robinson, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair. The project before us this afternoon is following on from our previous failed application, which was for a much larger turbine. Every effort has been made to address all the issues and concerns that were raised previously and discussed in meetings with both Mr. Murray and Mr. Duncan. This application leans heavily on the advice given. The proposed turbine has been deliberately chosen to have as low a visual impact as possible, and as can be seen from the photo montage, it is very slim, and at the height of 27 metres to the tip falls well within the definition of small to medium turbines, that is 20 to 50 metres range. Consideration was given also to its long life and reliable track record, an important factor if it is to be fit for purpose for the perceived duration of its life. The siting has been made much lower down the slope and placed in close association with the farm. This is in accord with the criteria of the Council's interim planning policy. The proposed turbine will provide power now and in the future for the current farming operations and meets the Council's policy on farm diversification as highlighted by the planning officer in his report. The power generated will provide power alternatives to reduce the dependence on tractor-powered equipment through clean energy. Modern farm systems are costly in energy. The farm business is a provider for local work and skills, injecting money into the local economy. We have a good record for pursuing environmental issues, having planted in excess of 2 hectares of native species woodland in the past 5 years, also continuing repairs and maintenance of the many stone walls, a strong feature of the local area. Plans for the future include rainwater capture to supplement livestock requirements and, in accordance with advice from SEPA, keep cattle out of streams and waterways. We respectfully seek the support of the Planning Committee to uphold the Planning Officer's sound and reasoned decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson. Any questions for the applicant? I just have one. You mentioned that you were going to, it would replace tractor-powered energy. Could you elaborate on that, please, sir?
Yes. On a unit such as ours, which is quite a small unit, basically we have one full-time tractor on the farm. We have got adequate slurry storage, and in modern language you have to spread the manure, pump it, all sorts of things, mix it. And for those purposes you would invariably need at least another tractor. So if you could replace that tractor with electricity powered equipment, quite feasible, and it would be a very useful arm to the business. Fossil fuels in your tractor, everything, it's just an ongoing concern. But most farms are trying to do work with less machinery that require an operator, and as such, if you could reduce tractor-powered equipment, it's bound to be a benefit.
Thank you, sir. I'm just intrigued, but that's fine. No other questions? No. Okay, sir, you can take your seat. Thank you very much. Members, we're in session. Alistair, please.
Thanks very much, Chairman. Councillor Nicholl. That as far as I'm concerned, so the matters in short compass, I have no problems whatsoever with approving Mr. Murray's report. As always, it's a well-balanced report, and I would particularly direct your attention. Mr. Robinson has already alluded to it, but I would direct your attention to paragraph 4.42 of the report, where it's made abundantly clear, in fact, that the previous application was refused. The applicant sought advice. The advice was tendered. The applicant has acted on that, and I think it's only right and just and proper that he should reap the benefits of it today by getting his application granted, sir, and I would move accordingly.
Mr. Dryborough.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nicholl. And I'm happy to, if that was a motion to second that particular thing, I think Mr. Robinson's actually listened to planning officers, listened to the committee. He's answered our concerns, I think, previously raised, and I don't have any problems with approving, subject to the conditions actually applied within the report.
Councillor McComb.
Thank you, Chair. I note 4 things from the report. Firstly, the applicant has followed the advice from the planning officer. Secondly, the proposed turbine is much closer to the steading. Thirdly, it is on the slope of the hill rather than close to the summit. And fourthly, the height of the turbine is largely in keeping with the neighbouring turbines on surrounding farms. I would be happy enough to support the application.
Okay, anyone otherwise minded? No. Paula?
Committee has determined to approve the application with the conditions as set out in the report.
Thank you. Item number 7 on the agenda, erection of a dwelling house and formation of access at land adjoining 1 Locharthur Terrace, Beeswing, Dumfries. Miss Eckstein, when you've gathered your thoughts.
Thank you, Chair. The proposal is for the erection of a single dwelling house and access onto the C10 on a site which lies between 1 Locharthur Terrace and Lane Villa in the village of Beeswing. The house would be 1.5 storey and would be positioned fairly centrally within the site, 3.6 metres off the northern boundary with 1 Locharthur Terrace and 4 metres off the south boundary with Lane Villa.
and at least 5 metres from the road. The house, as the sections show on the plans here, will have a lower ridge level than 1 Loch Arthur Terrace. This shows the elevations of the proposed house with dormers to the front and a small porch and the 1.5 storey extension to the rear. And these show the floor plan of the house with a T-shaped design and accommodation within the roof space. These are the photographs. This is looking towards the former Loch End Church, which is currently being converted to a house. The entrance to the application is to the opposite side of the road, marked the yellow arrow on the photograph. This is looking up Loch Arthur Terrace with the side gable of 1 Loch Arthur Terrace and the boundary wall with the application site to the right. And this is panning right from the previous photograph, looking to the centre of the application site with that'll come out. The garden of the shed belonging to Lane Villa to the right-hand side. And again, panning right with the application site to the left, looking southwards towards the edge of the village with Lane Villa and the new farm shop, bakery, cafe complex, which has been recently built behind the trees. This is taken from the rear of the site on the eastern boundary, looking right towards 1 Loch Arthur Terrace. And then panning left from the previous photograph, looking towards the front of the site, towards the former Loch End Church, and you can see the boundary wall along the frontage of the road. Then panning left again, and panning left again once more. The proposal is for full planning permission for a single dwelling house on a site that was originally granted outline planning permission for a single dwelling house in 2004. As noted in the report, amended plans were submitted in March 2013 to alter the position of the dwelling house to reduce its impact in terms of the massing and scale on the adjoining property, 1 Loch Arthur Terrace, and to provide clearance from the new underground electric cable, which will be along the boundary of Lane Villa, and also to amend the access and car parking arrangements to meet with the council roads officer's advice. A full assessment of the application site is contained within the committee report, and it's considered that the proposal is acceptable, this infill site within the village, and it's recommended that, subject to conditions noted, that the application be approved.
Any questions for the officer? Councillor Dempster.
Just maybe, Chair. Claire, could you flick back to the image or the proposed dwelling? It must be eight images back. Right. Is the ridge height to the rear of the property no higher than the frontage? I thought we didn't consider that appropriate when allowing a development to take place. We certainly don't when we allow extensions, unless it's just the way it looks. But if you look at the top right-hand image...
I think it's just the way it looks. If you actually look at the northwest elevation in the top right-hand corner, there's no... top left-hand corner, sorry, the ridge is not coming above the ridge line. And this is obviously an integrated design. What we don't like is where you've got a traditional building and then an extension is added onto it, which comes above the ridge line, and you then get an extension with a house attached to it rather than the other way around. But this one is okay. I think it's just the way it looks.
Just as an aside, I think what is confusing us is that, in fact, if you look closely at, as David was saying, the northwest elevation, the front, you can see the dormers are slightly below the ridge. So when you start to look at the picture at the elevation to the right, you can see the dormer, then the ridge inside the chimney, and if you look at the ridge height and the ridge level to the right of the extension, you'll see it's the same. Yeah. I think it's illusions.
That's just if it suits you. Councillor McKee.
It's just, one thing was, how does it compare in height? You said about the ridge height with number 1 Lochafer Terrace, but it's quite a bit below that level. And how does it compare in ridge height with Lane Villa? And he also mentioned it not being over-domineering or something to number 1 Lochafer Terrace. But when you see that extension on 1 Lochafer Terrace, God's truth.
Well, just to answer your query about the ridge level, the ridge level of the proposed house, if you look at the section of this drawing, it's actually about 1.2 metres below the ridge level of 1 Lochafer Terrace, the new dwelling. No, well, the ground, Lane Villa, it does come down because of the way the road, slopes down. So you'll have 1 Lochafer Terrace at that much higher, 1.2 metres higher above this property, and then obviously Lane Villa's lower down because it is well below. Yeah. If you look at if I show you the photograph just of this way down, you can see the way the road slopes down.
PG. Any further questions for the officer before we go to the speakers? Councillor Blake.
Yeah, can I just check from the plans there? Is it fairly similar in size to the house, the new build house at the other end of Lochafer Terrace in Davies Orchard?
Yes, it is. If I show you the plan. Can you see on that plan there? You can see that's Davies Orchard at the top end of the other end of Lochafer Terrace, and you can see that obviously it's a sort of similar footprint.
Okay, if there's no further questions, I'll go to the applicant's agent, Mr. Hastings. Mr. Hastings, you 3 minutes.
Yes, it's all right. I'll not require 3 minutes. I came here thinking that I would be answering questions raised by the objectors, but they didn't seem to come. I feel the objectors have sympathised with them because there was an earlier application. There was an application done over a year ago that I should have taken advice from the case officer that I have to say I have a lot of respect for. But in this case I didn't. I thought that a pair of semi-detached houses would have blended in with the terrace. However, that was against all the previous approval granted for a single dwelling house. And I think the point's been made, it's a single dwelling house. The other objections touched on the fact that the house was not following the line of Lochafer Terrace, but I can appreciate the charm of the character of Lochafer Terrace, the same as anyone else, but as we heard earlier on in this morning's meetings, the motor car seems to have taken great importance in any development, and because we have a 4-bedroom house here, we have to have a minimum of 3 car parking spaces, plus vehicle turning. So, we have to relieve this congestion on the road. The other slight misconception I made, I considered that would require a lay-by for vehicle turning and things, but after consultation with the roads department, an engineer from the roads department, this was reduced to a single access. Now, that's where my sympathy lies with the objectors. They have a suspicion that this is still going to be 2 houses, and I can assure you it wouldn't be. But I wouldn't touch on that because that's well covered in the committee report. So that's really all I have to say. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, sir. Just hold on a second.
Yes,
any questions for Mr. Hastings? No? Okay, you can take your seats, sir. Thank you very much. We're in session, ladies and gentlemen. Councillor Dyer.
Thanks, Chair, and looking at the report and looking and hearing the discussion of the applicant, which has clearly indicated to us that there was concern about two dwelling houses. This is now down to one. This is an application for one dwelling house. Looking through the application, I see no reason not to go with the recommendations and would suggest so.
Councillor Geddes.
If that's a motion, sir, I would be pleased to second it. Thank you.
Anyone otherwise? Councillor McKee.
Sorry, Chair. The only question I would ask is sightlines. See, it's quite a high wall, that. Does it need to be reduced, or has that been addressed in the report? I can't remember seeing it.
We've covered that by condition 9, where we've asked them to basically provide the sort of finalised details.
Okay, happy? Yep. Paul?
The committee has approved the application but subject to the conditions as set out in the report.
Thank you. We move on to item 8 in the agenda, which is erection of a temporary wind monitoring mast of maximum height 70 metres for a period of up to 3 years at Duncow Common, Kirkmahoe, Dumfries. Mary Duff.
Thank you, Chair. Move on to my item. Before I run through the plans and photographs, first of all, we'd just like to propose an amendment to condition 3 of the application, of the permission, the recommended permission. And that is to delete the words 25 candela equivalent brightness. And that would just mean, it would clarify that it is just infrared lighting only. There isn't really any need for the equivalent brightness within the condition. So moving on to the plans. The site location is just north of Duncow and about 2.5 kilometres south-east of A Village. It is located within sort of open and undulating moorland with access to the south of the site, which is marked there by the black dot. That's from Ellerslie Farm. The views of the site are mainly from the minor road there to the right-hand side of the dot, to the east side, and it's shown there as being sort of the green dots along the road. This is a closer view of the site, a block plan, and you can see that the land is generally rising from the east to the west. And the elevation showing the mast, which is a slimline pole supported by guy wires. And moving on to some of the photos which have been taken from the road which leads from Lochar-Briggs to A. This photo is to the southeast of the site, and the location of it is on the higher ground to the back of the picture. In between, there's 2 areas of forestry, so it would sit in between there. And this is moving north, and the sort of clump of trees that you can see in the middle of the picture there is at Watchman Moor, which is the highest point in the area, and the mast would be roughly to the left-hand side of that clump of trees, but sitting lower. And moving north again, this is showing the edge of just at the edge of Gledenholme Moor Forestry, which you can see to the right-hand side of the picture. And the mast would be roughly directly in front of the Watchman trees there in the centre, in between the 2 forested areas. So the application is recommended for approval with a condition that it is for a period of 3 years. It is considered that it does comply with the relevant policies which are set out within the committee report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Could you go back a couple of images, please? Stop. Too far. Aye, stop. Is that a windmill I see peeking its head above the horizon?
It is, yes. It's the wind, it's Doswinton Wind Farm turbines.
Any members, any questions? Councillor Dempster's the name.
Thank you. The question I have is, I thought we always tried to get consistency, and I realised the last application was for a turbine, and this is only for an anemometer mast. But I would like to have seen a 5 kilometre radius with an indication of where the different installations were, so that we could take that into account. And I appreciate it's not a permanent structure, but nevertheless, it would have been helpful, because there's no doubt it's a precursor to an application of things go according to plan.
Yes, I'm sorry, I hadn't spotted that wasn't in the papers. We tend to get more of these in the west, and the officers there always know to produce that. So, sorry, yes, it should have been there. I'll make sure they are in future.
Pierre Murray. You're getting her into trouble, Jim. Any other questions for the officer at this point? Okay, we have one speaker in this one, Mrs. Coles. Mrs. Coles, you have 3 minutes. Okay.
Thank you. I'm delighted that an infrared light has been specified, so thank you. But I request that the duration is reduced to 2 years. 1 year's data is needed for accurate noise predictions, and 1 year's results can be correlated with Met Office data. It's reasonable to grant 2 years in case of any freak weather patterns. Now, the case officer says that there's no planning ground to reduce the duration. I disagree. General Policies 1, 2, 7, Structure Plan Policy E3 are all concerned with protecting and safeguarding the environment, and so minimising the impact is a valid planning concern. There will be an adverse impact on the landscape and on the environment. The case officer thinks it will not be significant, but acknowledges that there will be an impact. It's therefore reasonable to reduce this impact by reducing the duration. At the last Planning Applications Committee, an agent was prepared to settle for a shorter mast, which would have an impact on wind speeds recorded, rather than a reduced duration. I suspect that some of these Met mast applications are more about putting a marker on a site and tying a landowner into an agreement than the wind speeds, which are all well mapped nationally and locally, with Met masts at Dalswinton, Hairstains and High Aldgirth. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Coles. Any questions for Mrs. Coles? No? Is this a... No. Okay, thanks, Mrs. Coles. In debate, Councillor Driver.
Thanks, Chair. And, I've got no problem with the report and that, and I'm listening to Mrs. Coles, and certainly in the past we have changed the period of time from the date of implementation of this particular thing, and I think we've got to be consistent as we go through this approach. Certainly, if we were to go down the routes of refusing, then there would certainly be a case of appeal because of the Met mass that we've given in the past. Now, whether they're in the west or the east, it's irrelevant. I think for this particular report, looking through all of the report itself, I've got no problem in the recommendations, although I would like to put in a change in amendment to recommendation 1, which is a period of 2 years rather than 3 years.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. At the risk of kind of repeating what Councillor Driver has said, I'm certainly in favour of reducing the period to 2 years. It's well known that enough data can be gathered within 1 year, and for safety's sake, 2 years is a reasonable period. In the past, of course, we have actually limited the period to 2 years, and I think it's actually a very good thing to do. So I'd support what Councillor Driver has suggested.
Councillor Dempster.
I was just going to endorse that view as well. It's a view I hold. 2 years is long enough. And I do think that, not for today obviously, but there's a saturation point being reached. And whilst we kind of refuse anemometer masts on the assumption that an application will come forward, I think our landscape architect has a major job in front of him or her to try and manage the applications that are coming forward, because I think that there will be some disappointed applicants before this process is finished.
I think you've reached saturation point here, come west. So we'll see. Any other comments? No, come west. Right, it is recommended for approval. Happy to agree that? Okay. Paula? With the variation to 2 years.
Committee has determined to approve the application subject to the conditions as set out in the report under amendment of condition 1 to a period of 2 years and under amendment of condition 3 as set out by the officer.
Thank you. We move on to item 9 on the agenda, amendment to consultation reference 11/C/4/0012, 132 kV overhead transmission line and electricity substation, including access road and location of poles at Gretna substation, and I'm not going to read it the next bit, to Ewe Hill and Newfield wind farms. Sorry? What are you going on about? I cannot take into consideration local dialects. Jessica Taylor, welcome.
So this is an amendment to an earlier consultation that we received in 2011. The black line on the map shows that the original line that was subject to the early consultation. So the amendment relates to the section directly north of the Gretna substation. Sorry, it's not very clear map. But at the bottom, you'll see that the line was going to come directly north into the substation, and now they're going to move it slightly to the east to come into the east side of the substation. So you'll see from the photographs on the left-hand side is the substation behind those trees, and so you'll see one of the towers to the right of that, and then it'll go into the background. So then if we look at it heading toward, looking at it from to the west, again the substation is on the left-hand side, and then the towers will go directly to the right and out of the picture. And the same again, the substation is on the left, and it's running out onto the right of the photograph. The recommendation is to raise no objections to the consultation, subject to the conditions within the report. Thank you.
What does a 13 kVA, 132 kV overhead line look like? Is that it? Those big pylons, that's what we're looking at? No, a pole? No. Right. Any question? Councillor Dempster, then Councillor McKee.
Is there any reason why, other than not finance, because it's cheaper to do poles than it is underground, but why have they suddenly decided not to underground the last section and install poles instead? It says that on 4.2 on page 119.
I don't know the answer to that. I assume it's because they are wanting to do further works at the substation. So by having it overground rather than underground, then that doesn't limit them in terms of what they do with their new compactor. What I don't know for certain.
Councillor McKee.
Is the rest of it overground? We talk about saturation point with turbines. What about these things? You see, they're going beyond the joke. And when you look at the map, they're closer to Langham than they're to Gretna. Why are they not going to Langham?
Because they connect into the Gretna substation, that's why. because they connect into it's to connect into the Gretna substation here to pass it on to the national grid. I mean, just to be clear that this is actually an application to make a minor variation to something as a committee you've already cleared. So it's only that bottom little section that they're no longer coming straight down into it and they're now coming round. So the principle of it has already been accepted by this committee, I'm afraid.
Point of clarification, Chair. I'm not comfortable with that because that would mean that electricity companies could apply for permission and put in their document that they're going to underground the cables, and then come in with a slight variation, and we have no alternative but accept it, and the slight variation is that they're overgrounding the cables, which is completely different from, it's not a slight variation, an overground cable from underground cable, it's a complete change of direction as far as I'm concerned. I don't mean direction as in west to east.
Councillor Driver.
I mean, one of the reasons why all this work's getting done is because of the switching that used to happen at Chapel Cross Power Station. The substations are the minor substations are now plastered around the site, which is actually going to help Dumfries and Galloway because the switching was actually done in the Chapel Cross electrical control room. So therefore, the substations are going to help the situation within Annandale and Eskdale on the Langham line, the Gretna line, the Dumfries line, and the Lockerbie line. So therefore, it's just a help, I think, in this particular area. Yes, there's a little deviation because I think the applicant actually listened to one of the landowners within that particular area, which was going to affect his agricultural industry. So that I think this is one that we can accept to raise no objections to. But as for the rest of it, I don't think there's going to be in the near future a lot of this infrastructure being replaced with newer infrastructure, certainly from right across the region and the north of England as well. And you're talking billions of pounds worth of work actually coming in this particular area. So it's replacing the existing stuff with new stuff. And we're actually training up people within the college at Dumfries and Galloway to actually do this work as well. So it's actually bringing some work in here. So I'm happy to accept that.
I thought because you'd caused this problem, I thought you were going to declare an interest action.
No, I didn't declare an interest because it's not to do with the Chapel Cross site, other than the fact that we used to do the switching. The biggest problem, of course, is there's no nuclear bill going on.
Any other comments, ladies and gentlemen? Councillor Dempster.
Comment, Jim, if you want. It's easier. No, I just want an answer to that particular question because I think there's a dramatic change between overgrounding cables and undergrounding. It's no slight amendment in my view. It might be a slight amendment as the electricity is still coming to the same location from the same source, but underground change to overground, in my view, is not a slight amendment.
Well, it's not a slight amendment, which is why they've got this consultation. But the vast majority of the line, as I understand it, is still going above ground, as was originally the case. It was only the last section which was going to be going underground. And then this is now, as Councillor Driver rightly says, is listening to a farmer. They've had to make the change to make it above ground. So it is a relatively small section of the overall line, which was always going to be overground. It's only this last little section which is now going from underground to overground.
I realise that, and I had read the report and I knew that. I just think that is not modest in my view because of the. I mean, I don't know if there's a reason why they couldn't underground to the new route. But anyway, that's by the by. The local member's happy with it. I'm happy with it. I just wasn't comfortable that it was described as a minor change when the physical appearance would be completely different.
Councillor Geddes.
Chairman, I would move that we adopt the recommendations detailed in the report.
Agreed. Thank you. Paul.
Committee has approved to raise no objections subject to the conditions as set out in the report.
Okay. Thank you very much for your attendance, folks. Thank you.